Yes, so I thought to have a little chat about builders. I think people worry about the build element. How do I find a good one? How do I avoid rogue traders?
It's a big fear people have, and to be honest, rightly so. It's an unregulated industry. There's no one ensuring quality.
All right, let's go through some red flags. Wanting to be paid up front. If anybody a builder, contractor wants more than 25% of the job up front, that's a red flag. I think this is something, if you don't know this person and they want a lump sum of money paid into a personal bank account, I would question it.
And suddenly they're saying, no, I want to be paid weekly, or they're suddenly wanting much bigger payment than you were expecting, or not turning up on site. If there's doubt, there's no doubt.
So let's have a look at some of the things that we've learned and can help others maybe in terms of tips for avoiding situations that we have found ourselves in.
Well, I think the big thing is a lot of people, when they're viewing properties, they don't actually know.
Building wealth through property isn't about chasing big deals and paydays. It's about owning assets that make money for you consistently. But figuring it all out on your own, that's where most people get stuck. That's why we created this Property Life membership. It's everything we wish we had when we started. Expert guidance, real-world case studies, and a private community of investors actually doing deals, not just talking about them. So you could spend years trying to piece it all together yourself, or you could plug into a system that's already working for our community. Check out our membership page at This Property Life. Everything you need to know is right there. Success is a team sport. Come join in. Hi, and welcome to This Property Life. I'm Nick Claydon, and I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my other half, Caroline, today. It's been a while since we've joined on a podcast together.
I know, we have been a little bit busy.
Just a bit
a lot going on, yes.
Yes, so I thought maybe timely to have a little chat about builders. I know that there's something that a lot of people, I think, worry about a lot, particularly anyone that's never, first getting into property maybe, or starting to do something a bit more than just a refurb. I think people worry about the build element. How do I find a good one? How do I avoid rogue traders? I think it's a big issue for a lot of people. So let's go straight in. Caroline.
Before we jump in, let's tackle one of the biggest hurdles for property investors: finding the best buy-to-let locations for top returns. Over the years, we've helped countless individuals pinpoint the most profitable locations and maximise their rental income. To make it easier for you, we've put together a free guide to buy-to-let hotspots for 2025, designed specifically for you to understand the market, stay ahead of the trends, and it even includes a list of our top 10 locations in the UK. Get it now for free by clicking the link in the description below and start building your property portfolio today.
It's a big fear. It's a big fear people have. And to be honest, rightly so. You have Channel 5 with programs called Rogue Trader, Dodgy Builder, whatever it's called. And, it does put fear into the public, and it's an unregulated industry. Bottom line, there's no one ensuring quality. And because of the way that companies can be set up, dissolved, these guys that are doing substandard work and overcharging or maybe walking off jobs, they can get away with it for prolonged periods of time without anyone really holding them account. So I can understand why people are worried about it. And so I thought maybe it's so topical that people could learn from our mistakes, because we've made many over the years, I guess. Some not so big, some bigger. And we've got so many colourful stories to share about builders, but lots of lessons within that. So I think while this is actually quite a raw topic for us right now, I think it's really timely and important that people hear the good, the bad, the ugly, warts and all behind working with builders.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's a good point. It says that, we never shy away here from giving you the real story. We're not immune to making mistakes. Is that you admitting to making a mistake? Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is being accountable and just saying, okay, this is a really rubbishy situation. What have I learned from it? What's it teaching me? And what am I not going to do next time? Or what am I going to do next time to prevent that? And I have to say, we are quite good at that. I certainly am. Like our most recent incident, I take 100% on my shoulders. I take responsibility for it, and I'm happy to share it and own up to what I could do better next time, because that's how you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's really important that everyone understands, whether you're in property or just starting out, that you're not going to be perfect every time. There's not going to be Every deal is going to throw things at you, and it's all about how you cope with it. And if you don't set your bar at perfection, if you set it below perfection, then you won't be too disappointed when things go wrong, which they do frequently. So let's have a look at what are some of the things that we've learned and can help others maybe in terms of tips for avoiding situations that we have found ourselves in.
Well, I think the big thing is a lot of people, when they're viewing properties, they don't actually know how much a refurb is going to cost because they're not builders themselves. They might work in the trades, but when you're looking at an entire project where it's maybe a 3-bedroom terraced house and it needs new windows, redecoration throughout, new kitchen, new bathroom, for someone coming straight into property, they're like, I have no idea how much that's going to cost me. So that's normally the first stumbling block. And so if they do ever get builders through the door to quote for that work, they don't know if that's a realistic quote or not. So that's a real education in itself. And the only way to really learn is by asking other people. So if you are viewing a property and you're not really sure how much the refurb is going to be, take loads of video footage, photos. The only differential on this is, of course, location, because replacing a bathroom in London is going to cost a lot more than replacing a bathroom in Burnley, for example. But location, the amount of work that's needed done, the constants are materials, cost, but labour, of course, does differ. So having people that you can lean on, rely on, and ask opinions of is a good place to start for the cost of refurbs. And if you're going to guesstimate, always over guesstimate, maybe guesstimate and add 15-20% onto it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people go into it being a little bit too bullish about it, and thinking what we've learned is things always cost a little bit more. There's always something that will be uncovered during a refurb or a project that's going to cost you a bit extra. So always, first tip would be always build in a bit of extra into your costings, but try and get your costings as accurate as you can. But also talk to people. So I think one of the first things that we learned, what we did is, if you're looking for builders, start with getting a recommendation from somebody. But how do we start that? Where do we go to get a recommendation?
So there's a number of different places that you can go for recommendations. Good place would be even letting agents and estate agents. So even who you're buying properties from, who are they selling properties for, and who did the work on those properties. That's a good place to get started. Also, merchants. So your builders, merchants, yards, like who are the tradies going in and getting the materials? Who are the busy guys that are constantly through the doors? It sounds a bit weird, but you could just literally sit outside a builder's merchants and just see the vans that are going in and out and collect names. And that's actually quite a good wee place to start on gathering intel in a local area if you're not really sure where to start.
I just a lot what I'm out mentoring is the guys I'm working with to just start noticing contractor vans that you see around. Unless you've actually thought about it, they're kind of like white noise in the background. You don't really notice them. But as soon as you kind of tell your brain, right, look out for these, and you start seeing them everywhere. Joiners, plumbers, roofers, plasterers. They've all got branded vans and with a phone number normally on there, on an email address on there. And the handy thing is, if you're out in your area, just start snapping some photos of these, and you build yourself a little database of contracts you can go to. And I think it's important if you're starting out and you're doing little refurbs, I'm talking, 8 to 15, 20K max kind of refurbs. It's important to also go to the right type of builder. You don't really want a building company. You really want, one of the local operators.
Like a handyman that's kind of can turn his hand to most things, but might actually get specialists in like the Sparkies or whatever. But a handyman is worth his weight in gold. I think joinery is the fundamental, isn't it? Because you can pull in the tiler, the roofer, the spark. But a good solid joiner that's can fit kitchens and windows and the likes is worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely. So it's kind of start there and bring your other trades in.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing to think about here is also how big are they? That has an implication on maybe if they're VAT registered or not. Now, on a £15,000 little buy-to-let refurb, going to a one-man band that's below the VAT threshold is really where you want to be. But if you're doing a much, much bigger project, then checking that they are VAT registered is important, because that means that they're a big enough operation to support your project. So I know, that's an element within the costs that we need to consider. Try not to get into conversations with builders around cash in hand to avoid VAT and all of that stuff. That's normally a red flag. Look, there's the odd occasion where you might have one person that's doing a small part of a job, like maybe a specialist like cornicing, and you pay for the materials and then you pay for the labor and cash potentially. But look, it's anything other than that is probably not worth doing it, because you want to be able to account for everything you've spent on that property anyway. So you might as well do everything correctly right at the beginning.
Absolutely. Right. I think we'll come on to kind of quick fire red flags at the end as we're summing up, right? But I think it's probably time to take a deep breath and delve into some of our mistakes.
Oh man, how long you got?
Well, we got about 40 minutes. We'll have to narrow it down.
Well, also, I can think of a very, very early mistake we made on a buy-to-let. And then I can think of a mistake that we made on the renovation of our own house. And I do definitely categorize those two things separately, because I think when you are getting renovations done to your house, you're motivated with your heart. When you're getting buy-to-lets done, you're motivated with your head. So I am going to put them in. I'm going to put them in separate brackets right now.
Right.
But I'm comfortable to talk about our first buy-to-let lesson in refurbs, and we must caveat that we had no supportive network. We had not been educated in property investing at this point. We were trying to do it all by ourselves, and knowing what we know now, this project should have taken about 3 weeks, but it took about 6 months. So that gives you a little indicator on how bad we got it wrong.
It was amateur hour.
It was amateur hour. So what did we do?
I think the initial thing with that is we thought we could do it on our own, and we tried to cut corners.
Yeah. When you say cut corners, we want to cut costs, because when you first start out and money's tight, you try and do things cheaper than when you're a bit more sensible than you would otherwise. You're far too in the detail of everything. Whereas as you get a bit more experienced, you're better at looking at bigger picture and going, shit, I've probably overpaid there by, 500 quid. But you can take the view that, well, 500 quid in 6 to 12 months time is not going to matter. But when you're starting right at the beginning, that extra 500 quid is like massive on your project. So yeah, that's just an experience thing that comes with doing and taking the action.
So let's take the scene. We bought a little flat. We did it pretty much. I think we can tick almost every box of doing things wrong on this particular deal.
Oh, come on. We did we not get it at a discount?
Not really. Took advice from a solicitor selling the property on what the price should be. Knocked a couple of grand off.
Thought we were doing well at that.
It was quite distressed. It was a little flat in a Gorgie area of Edinburgh, which is up and coming. I think it's still up and coming 20 years later.
No, it's a good wee. I'd buy more there for sure.
Yeah, I would now, to be fair. But it took a little while to get there.
It was ground floor, so there was some damp. It needed new kitchen, new bathroom. It had no gas central heating.
It's a very small 1-bed flat.
Yeah, 1-bed flat. No gas central heating. A wee old man had lived there, and so yeah, the decoration was the brown swirly carpets and pretty nasty wallpaper. So, we thought it's small.
Nice little one to cut our teeth on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't even remember what we budgeted to spend on that. But I do remember sitting in my mum and dad's living room with you and us discussing the sequence of what needs done. And we thought the best idea would be to start stripping the wallpaper. I think that's what we thought was quite important. Or at least we thought, well, we could do that and we could save money on stripping wallpaper because we could do that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're talking to lots of friends, not in property.
Yeah. So we
were asking for recommendations from the wrong people.
Yeah, exactly. So we did one kind of half thing, right? We were looking for recommendations, and I think the first thing we identified that we needed somebody that we can do was someone to fit central heating system.
Yeah.
So we asked some friends if they knew any plumbers.
One guy was recommended and he was just setting out on his own. He just literally passed his gas safety course or something.
Yeah, he just qualified as a plumber.
That's it.
He'd been in corporate world before.
Yeah. So he was doing a complete career change, wanted to set up on his own as a plumber, got the skills, or got the qualification, I should say. And we met him in a pub for a chat. Seemed really nice. And because he's a friend of a friend, of course, you have certain common ground. And then he came to look at it. Then he went away to have a think about it. And then he came back to have another look at it. And nothing really seemed to happen apart from lots of going to the pub, I think.
There was a few little flags, not a major red flag, but a couple of little flags started raising when he kind of strolled around looking at it. And looking back now, it's like it's probably the simplest boiler install
you can get.
Job you could get. A little one bed flat. It's one boiler and probably 5 radiators system. That's it. You know, absolutely just bog standard. If you pardon the pun, I think is in there.
Well, at least he wasn't walking around site with a cigarette hanging out his mouth, you know, conveying the situation while he's fitting the gas. So that was a plus.
Yeah, but it took him 2 or 3 days to just walk around and kind of think about it. And that should have been a major red flag at that point.
But we were like, oh, you know, we didn't really have anything to, what do you call it? Like, view this against. It's not like we did this often. So it's not like we had any idea of, well, is this normal or not? We were just...
And then there was a major red flag was when, you know, turned up to do a little bit of work, I think, to start. And then it was an afternoon. It was like, right, you know, we need to talk about this and let's go to the pub. Oh, okay. I don't normally need an excuse to go to the pub, to be fair. But I was kind of thinking it was probably a bit early to knock off. But anyway, we went, and red flag was I think I had one pint. And in that time period, he had drank a bottle of wine and a pint. And that was a bit of a flag. And I thought,
No, you know, he's maybe a fast drinker. Come on, Nick. Maybe you need to step up.
Maybe. But suddenly kind of the late appearances on site and the early finishes started to make a little bit more sense. And a job that should have taken probably about 3 days took a couple of months.
Yeah, and he didn't finish it.
Never finished it. So, that was a red flag. But I guess it started with really not trusting our gut on that one. Someone who's literally just qualified and never done a boiler install before. At the time, we were all about, let's give him a go. He should be all right.
No, I think it was more naivety. I don't think it was trusting our gut, because I don't think that even after 3 weeks, we were like, oh, this is this is a mistake. I think we were just like, oh, naivety, be nice because of that friendship recommendation. So actually, the biggest lesson is business, and you keep it separate from any kind of friends. So, for example, I've got school mums whose husbands are in the trades, and I would never get them involved in any of my projects, just purely for that reason. Is you just never know what's going to happen in a project, and you don't want to be in that awkward situation where you need to have a difficult conversation with them, but you feel you can't because they're a mate or a husband of somebody you know. That, I think, changes the dynamic of everything. So for me, that's the biggest lesson. We were naive. It was all friendly. Then we couldn't have the difficult conversation because of the friendship thing. So,
and I think that is a lesson that I learned quite early on, and I've already stopped with is to basically, exactly that. Keep it separate. Don't make friends with your builders and contractors, because you have to go into every kind of relationship like that thinking I might have to sack this person, but you do, and it's a lot harder to do that if you're your best pals. And there's been
I struggle with this. I really struggle with this because you
want to be nice to everyone and you want everyone to like you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think everyone wants everyone to like them.
Yeah.
I also want people to like me, but I do go into things with a bit more hands up, arm's length.
You're very more reserved. I think we potentially work well together is the good cop, bad cop thing. Whereas I can be really hands-on, very chatty. If they like you, there's far more that can get done that maybe under normal circumstances wouldn't get done or they wouldn't want to do for you. But then when things get serious or it gets ugly, then you can step in. I guess that kind of works at the moment with us, but I'm getting better at keeping that whole matey pally thing at arm's length now. I am getting better at it.
Marginally.
Okay. Pretty.
Yeah, no, I think you're more aware of it.
Yeah.
I think I'm more aware of it. And I've always kind of been the other way around. It's like someone's got to earn the right to be pally.
Well, you're like, I've got enough friends. I don't need any more. So there we go. That's your attitude to life, where I'm like, yay, like a puppy, like, let's be friends and play. Anyway, so that was the lesson there. And look, we fumbled our way through that. In fact, there was a hospital visit when I attempted to try and take the wallpaper off the wall. And I think some plaster came off with a bit of wallpaper and it flicked into my eye. So I ended up in hospital with like some kind of scratched cornea. So that's when I knew that my relationship with DIY was over. I can't even strip wallpaper. And we realized, you know what, let's just get people in that can do this quicker and better and more efficient without injury.
Yeah, exactly. It was an early lesson of don't try and do it yourself. You might think you're saving money or cutting corner, but unless you are actually skilled in DIY, at the very least, or trade, then
I don't know. Like over the years, the amount of people that I've trained to invest in property that are tradies,
different.
They're the hardest to get off the tools because they're such control freaks, and they think, well, I can do the joinery at the weekends, and it's going to be to my standard, and I'm going to save a fortune. But they slow the project down by just doing it at weekends and evenings, and actually, your time is much better spent out there finding deals and raising money. Those are the only two things you should be doing. So the tradies take a little while to get their heads into, no, get other tradies to do the work that you're used to doing and get out there, find deals and raise money. So yeah, no tools allowed.
The ultimate is that you're not involved at all.
Yeah.
The ultimate is that if you're doing a project, you employ a project manager who does it all.
Yeah.
And you just monitor them and you pay for it.
That's it.
And you're not involved. And we're not quite there.
Well, we were. It's like one step forward, two steps back.
I don't think we were, because if we think back to when we did, the Staff Street Hotel, we were really involved in that. We've been really involved in this one. Ultimately, for the next one, the aim would be to not be involved in the development at all.
Okay, so I'm going to pick you up on this and explain why we were more involved than we should have. And that's not having the correct people in the team on board. So if we think back to Stafford Street, the level of detail in the architect's drawings wasn't there. So the builder needed direction all the time. And there was lots of conversations about what's right and what's wrong. And actually, if it was set up correctly right at the beginning with the correct architecture, with correct QS involved and all of that, then we would not have needed to be involved. So that was the lesson, is having the right people, the right advisors, the right team is key to any big development. But most of our listeners aren't doing big developments, right? They're wanting to start out, or they're scaling up, or wanting to move quicker than what they are right now. So we can talk about bigger developments later, I guess.
Yeah, but I think going into everything, even if you're doing a straight buy to let, is to go in with the mindset of you'll get the right people in to do the right jobs.
Yeah. And even if that costs you a little bit more, it is worth every penny. But I guess the key is spotting when someone's taking advantage or not.
All right, let's go through some red flags.
Oh, God. Okay.
Red flags: wanting to be paid up front.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're talking to contractors and it's okay if they want to get going with some materials, but most contractors, and certainly builders and building companies, would start and have their own funds to be able to get the job started.
Or they have trade accounts.
Or they have trade accounts, yeah.
They have trade accounts that they can get the materials on with 90-day payment terms, or 60-day payment terms, or 30-day payment terms, whatever. And then that gives them the materials up front, do some work, then invoice you, they get paid, and off we go. It keeps it going.
That's how it should work.
That is how it should work. Look, I get the one-man band guy. He doesn't have the cash flow to support your refurb on a buy-to-let. So there has to be a sensible compromise on that. So it could be that you set up your own trade account and he does it on yours, or you pay using your own credit card at the merchants to get the materials. That's a really safe way of you not just handing over some cash to him and hoping that he's buying the materials. Because that's the worry, right? You hand over money and all your power's gone. Whoever has the money has the power.
Correct. As soon as you hand the money over, you're out of control.
Yeah.
You don't have the control about what happens next.
Yeah.
You want to see, as I said, how it should work is the work gets done, you pay for the work that's done. Yeah. So red flags, if anybody a builder, contractor wants more than 25% of the job up front, that's a red flag. And you need to be questioning, what am I cash flowing your business here? And what else are they doing? Because the danger is they take your money, start another job, and then your money goes into that job, and it becomes kind of a bit of a Ponzi scheme.
And look, there's plenty of builders out there that do exactly that. Look, they're good builders, but they're just terrible at their admin, terrible at their cash flow management, and then wheels fall off. And it might be that there's no maliciousness behind it, but that's how they get themselves into bother. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a red flag. Some other red flags.
Well, I think checking them out on Companies House gives you a good idea of how long their business has been going. Obviously, for the smaller guys, they might just be sole traders. That might be harder. But I would definitely be looking at previous jobs. And if they're not willing to show you previous jobs, that's a red flag. Yeah.
On Companies House, you mentioned Companies House. That's a good way of doing your own due diligence on a builder. So if they are operating through a company, you can go onto Companies House, you can check out their company history. So what would be a red flag if you're looking at someone's company history?
So you want to see the longevity of the companies. You want to check that they're filing their accounts on time. You want to see consistency in how their name is spelt and their addresses on Companies House.
So a red flag would be if things don't match. Yeah. Or if a company has just been opened, particularly if previous companies have been shut down. So if you see a history of companies being opened and closed and then reopened again with similar names, that would be a red flag.
Similar spellings, that is a red flag, a big red flag for sure.
You know, if that happens, then you do need to ask your builder about it and see if they're open and honest about it and have a genuine reason for closing a company down and then starting a company again.
Yeah.
It is something that happens. And if you don't check out on Companies House, you know, that can burn you, because if there's a problem and you pay them too much money and you go after them, it's very, very easy to shut the company down. It's a limited company, liability is limited, and just open another one. Happens.
Yep, it does. Yeah. So yeah, Companies House, the way that they communicate, and I do think this sounds a bit soft, but trust your gut. Like when you meet someone, what vibe do you get? Like your gut is very rarely wrong. How responsive are they when you communicate with them? Do they answer their phone when you ring? Do they ignore your messages? Like what kind of vibe are you getting just in those initial contacts? That tells you a lot, I think. And that gut feeling that you have should stand you in good stead as long as you listen to it. I say with a wry smile.
Yeah, I mean, look, you might see some red flags and you might talk to the builder and they might have an answer, and then you got a decision to make based on your gut feeling. Do I still feel good about this? Do I accept their explanation and let's go with it, or not? But then you've got to be able to make that decision and go, actually, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Even if that person appears to be the perfect person for the job. So it's really important to just do that bit of due diligence on somebody.
Again, I think if they're sole traders and they're one-man bands, this is much, much harder to do that due diligence. But if someone is reputable, they've been in the market for a while as a good tradesperson, then there'll be enough good testimonials out there that you could dig about and find. Again, from either estate agents, letting agents, where they're, how many jobs do they have on at any one time? Those things are good indicators again for you to kind of trust your gut on.
Okay. Any other red flags? So back to kind of on payments, so we've looked at wanting payment up front, wanting payments direct into a personal bank account is another.
Well, unless they're sole trader, right?
If they are a sole trader, then I think this is something, if you don't know this person and they want a lump sum of money paid into a personal bank account, I would question it.
Well, banking system is really good now, right? Because if the name on the account doesn't match the name that they're giving you, the bank's going to tell you, like, excuse me, this name isn't the same. So if you're thinking that Joe Bloggs Joinery is where you're sending the money, and then you put in Joe Bloggs Joinery and it says, no, this is Joe Bloggs, then that tells you it's a personal account as opposed to a business account. So the banking should help you with that. And again, another little safeguarding is for the very first bank transfer payment, you want to just send £1, check that it is received before sending any larger sums as well.
Yeah, and don't send large amounts, because there is no recourse to get it back if you do. What we used to do when we were doing kind of the buy-to-let stuff was to, and you kind of touched on before, was to try and pay as much as we can on a credit card, because if you do pay on a credit card, then you have the Consumer Credit Act, which is your best friend in these circumstances. So if someone is fraudulent and you paid on a credit card, then you can get that money back.
Yeah. So
a lot of smaller operators might not have the facility or tell you they don't have a facility to take a card payment.
Yeah.
And that's normally nonsense, because anyone can take a card payment. You just have to literally ring your bank and facilitate it, and they will send you a card reader. I mean, if you get cabs now, they all have little mini card readers in their accounts. Anyone can get a card reader. It's not difficult. So we used to insist on it. We used to insist that if somebody wanted a cash payment, we'd say, no, we're paying by card.
I know, but let's explain why people are reluctant to take card payments. Is because if they're using Stripe, for example, Stripe will take a small fee for taking a card payment. So we would say, well, we'll pay the fee. And then if they've got a problem with that, then that again would be another red flag. Like, you've been in business for 10 years, you're, doing work extensively across the city. You have to have means of taking other payments as opposed to just bank transfers, surely.
Not everyone, but there's a lot of these guys are not particularly tech savvy, maybe.
Yeah. And
so they think it's difficult, and it's really not. You can set up a Stripe account in minutes, and that then allows you to just literally send a payment link and get a card payment back. It's really, really simple. So it is something that, again, if you're worried about, you can insist on, because, as you said, go look up the Consumer Credit Act. It is your friend in these situations, and a card payment is you can reclaim it if someone is fraudulent. So definitely do that. One other red flags, one other problems that we have that we missed. You said there's one on our house. Which one were you going to talk about?
Well, yeah, that guy wanted money up front, and I stupidly did it because I wanted the work done, and it was my house, and my brain fell out my head.
He talked a really good game, and it was to be fair, he appeared very professional. There was a legit company that we did check out, although there were a couple of similar named companies, I think.
At the time, he was basically doing project management for us. And so he was like, right, I need 15 grand for the electrics, 15 grand for the plumbing, let's go. And then we subsequently found out throughout the project that he hadn't paid the plumber, and the plumber's like, I need to get paid. And I'm like, well, I've paid 15 grand. What are you talking about? And turned out we did a credit search on the company, probably too late because we were already in work with him, and there was credit issues on that company. And yeah, he was about to fold. And so we were left picking up the pieces. Plumber did finish the job with us. We paid him direct, and he had to then, battle that project manager himself. But I had paid on my credit card because he had a shop associated with his business. So that did help us. But yeah, again, credit searching. We haven't talked about credit searching companies. You can do that to see how credit worthy they are. Again, that's a wee bit harder in the trades. This guy had a shop as well as a trade behind it. So yeah, you'll need to.
It's just be aware of who you're paying. And I say, as you've pointed out, it's much harder now for anyone to be fraudulent about that because of the banking checks to make sure you are paying the correct company. But just, be on top of that and just make sure the company that you're paying is the correct one.
Yep.
Good. What other red flags would there be?
Going back on any kind of arrangements. So let's say you're a third of the project through and you've agreed to be paying monthly, and suddenly they're saying, no, I want to be paid weekly, or vice versa, or they're suddenly wanting much bigger payments than you were expecting, or you're seeing work that hasn't been done, but he's saying has been done. That's normally a red flag. Or not turning up on site.
That's the one I was going to flag. That was my biggest red flag for me, is disappearing on you, not turning up on site. There was one builder, remember, we worked with down in the Northwest, did a few things for us. It was great, really great, did some good things for us on HMOs, and then we were doing another project and suddenly things weren't happening and he wasn't on site. He was always in his van. Oh, I'll go and pick this up. I'll go and pick that up. He was never there. You turn up on site. Where is he? oh, he's in his van picking up this. I'm like, hang on a minute, he's supposed to be project managing this job. Why is he the one driving around in a van picking stuff up? Just get stuff delivered. Everyone, all the merchants deliver to site. And that was a red flag, and kind of let it go, really. And this is, again, a really important one, is if you see those red flags, is to get on it straight away and confront it. And this is, again, a situation where he probably got a bit too friendly, and suddenly then it became a really awkward conversation.
Well, I think in hindsight, because that's very powerful, again, he was an excellent builder, but a terrible man manager and a terrible money manager, project manager. And you find that's quite common within the trades. They're fantastic at what they do, but when it comes to trying to get bigger and scale, they just don't have the capacity for it, or they bite off too much, and then the wheels start to fall off, and then that's when the erratic behavior can set in. So I guess another thing to do in your due diligence is check out what kind of projects they've done in the past. Are they similar to the ones that you want them to do for you? And what kind of level are they doing it to? Because what I'll say on recommendations is we're putting a lot of weight on recommendations, but what I've discovered over the years is one man's meat is another man's poison. Someone who thinks that this builder is fantastic, somebody else will have used and gone, their standard of work is terrible. So you do need to check out previous work and ask opinions of previous clients to just spot check, is it in line with what your expectations are? And I have made a mistake in that in the past, where I visited a project they'd done. It was definitely not the standard I wanted. And I thought by showing him one of my previous projects and the standard that I expected, that suddenly he'd take that on board. But he frankly didn't have the capacity to do it. He was not equipped to give me the high level of finish. He's only been used to doing the low level. So he can talk a good game, but unless you've actually physically seen it for yourself, do you really want to trust somebody's word for it? Lots of lessons here, Nick. Lots of lessons.
We're not trying to make out that, everyone's a rogue builder. There are some brilliant builders out there. Really great people to work with. We've had many, many excellent contractors over the years. We're just trying to highlight things that have gone wrong and think that you can have a great contractor that suddenly something happens in their life and they're not great. And that goes to, the guy we used in Northwest. He was brilliant for about 2 years. Our go-to guy. Great projects, delivered on time, on budget, but then the wheels fell off.
Yeah.
And we were probably too slow to react. Probably saw the red flags and thought, well, he's got a bit of history with us, it's all good. But actually, they were major red flags. Not turning up on site day after day after day is a really big one, because they're either heads fallen off and they've realised that they're bitten off more than they can chew and they don't want to face it, or they've got other jobs on the go and suddenly they've spread themselves too thin.
Yeah.
Your project slows because maybe someone else is paying them, or they're getting better paid on a different job.
The other thing is, again, the responsiveness to communication in that period. So if someone is, behaving in a way that you're not used to them behaving, and they're not responding to your phone calls or your messages, that's all you need to know. If there's doubt, there's no doubt.
Well, yeah, this has happened to us recently. Okay, so, essentially, work had slowed down on our project, and the contractor was like, no, don't worry. Monday morning, we're all full team, hitting it hard.
Yeah.
This was like on a Thursday. Monday morning, went to site, ghost town.
Yeah.
Where is he? Can't get hold of him. Where is he? He's on holiday. Taking a whole team on holiday for a week, which had been planned for months. But to actually look us in the eye and say, I'll be there full team on Monday, knowing he was going on holiday, that was a big one.
That was a red
That was
flag.
like 2 red flags. That was a massive red flag.
Yeah. Big flag. Look, I mean, our most recent experience of this has been possibly the most uncomfortable, because it's such a big project and such big numbers involved. And the worst thing that can happen on a development is, number one, you run out of money. That's number one. You run out of money, builder walks off because they're not getting paid, and suddenly your building site is just a ghost town. And to get another builder to come back and finish it once you do have the money, that's incredibly challenging. So you are looking at prolonging a project and therefore delaying you getting any kind of revenue in from it. The next thing that's worse than the running out of money is you getting rid of the contractor, or the contractor just disappearing and ghosting you, and you're sat there now with a half finished, 3/4 finished, a third finished project, and you having to get somebody in to clean up the mess. And what you will find is there is normally a mess to clean up, because builders do not like to walk off site if they're doing a really good job, right? And so we found ourselves in a situation where me, I ignored them.
Collective responsibility.
I am taking 100% responsibility on this.
I know, it's a collective responsibility.
We made measured decisions based on a number of factors. It's never always, just one factor. This was a holistic approach of recommended, know the people who he does work for, spoke to them. They weren't singing praises, but weren't bad mouthing. Looked at the projects that he'd done before, weren't up to scratch, but promised me they would be. Communication was a bit erratic before the job had even finished. Getting information out was not brilliant at the beginning, just a little bit, again, erratic with communication. All those red flags I chose to ignore because 2 people had recommended on speed, and speed was of importance to us. And we put speed above most things when choosing this builder. And that was a mistake. And what it's done is slowed us down, because we now are having to go back and rectify a lot of the stuff. This guy was not equipped to do the project at the size that it was. Nowhere near. But promised the earth, really wanted it on his portfolio as a project that he'd done. But frankly, was just not doing the level. So we found subsequently that even if he'd carried on the project, there's no way that building would have passed building control. No way. So I would have been project finished, money emptied, and a building I couldn't open and use for revenue. So that is probably worse than a running out of money on a project, right? So we needed to make a call literally just 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't pleasant. It was a difficult decision to make, because you're looking at the deadline that you were working to, and knowing that if you make this decision to change contractors, that deadline is now not going to happen. That's incredibly challenging. I found that emotionally the hardest thing to manage, because mentally the end point was always the end point, and we were working hard to get to that end point. And then knowing that end point is no longer a reality, that was tough for me to take. When you make that decision that you need to cut ties and move on, egos are going to be hurt, and that's when bad behavior can start. And as long as you know that everything that you've done is correct contractually and morally, I can look myself in the mirror and know that, well, we did the right decision for us and our business. And yeah, his ego is hurting, and he'll throw his toys out the pram and shout and scream and stamp his feet. But frankly, that's not my concern. If he had done what he was being paid to do, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But I shouldn't have chosen him to be the contractor in the first place. So there we go. We're evens. So there we are. For disclosure, we are now in the process of finishing that project with new contractors. I'm way more involved on the project management side than I was previously. And that's because there is a lot of things that we're having to undo to put right. So fire collars were missing, the wrong plasterboard was on the ceilings. There was lots of corners cut for him to probably make a bigger profit margin. And so, yeah, it's going to cost us money to rectify those mistakes. We're not in the business of bad-mouthing people, but Edinburgh is very, very small, and it's not going to take long for word to get out. And so, yeah, disappointing, but I take responsibility for ignoring those red flags and choosing speed, which has ultimately cost me time, and it's cost me money. So there we are. Full disclosure, it's 27 years in this game, and I think because I've been in the game so long, that probably added to the motivation of a builder wanting to do work for you. So they think that you've got bucket loads of cash that they can just keep going into and pulling out of as and when they want. So again, that I think if you're sometimes at the beginning and you're leaning on your builder and asking for help and saying, what would you advise in this situation? You might think that you are showing your cards for not knowing what you're doing, but actually when you've been in the game a long time, you're equally as vulnerable because they see you as an easy meal ticket, which I think was part of this guy did.
And yeah, it's a lesson. It's been a big lesson for us, but it has been. Yeah, I think we're thankful that we found out when we did and had an opportunity to rectify it without. It could have been a lot worse if we'd ignored those our gut and the major red flags and kept going. If you find yourself digging a hole, stop digging. So we did that. We stopped digging, climbed our way out of the hole, and at the end of the day, that's what I kept saying was to Caroline was, look, in a year's time, 5 years' time, the fact that we're a month late opening and it costs us a bit more, it's not going to matter. Yeah, property is very forgiving over the long term. Property is really forgiving over the long term.
It takes a lot of maturity to have that view, though. And our listeners, if they're thinking about 10, 15, 20 grand more on a refurb that they've been scrimping and saving to or raising money for, that's going to be really tough for them to hear. But you're right, in the long term, actually, again, for our mental health, it's like, is this going to matter in a year's time? Actually, what's more important? My kids' health. So, it'll get done. The job will get done. Okay, it might be a week late. It might cost me an extra X amount of thousand, whatever, but it'll get done. And at the end of the day, my deathbed, this is just a little bump on the road. It's not even going to feature in my thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. So even if thinking back to the first little flat we did, with all those mistakes we made, we still own that flat. And do you know what? That is it's one of our best performing properties because rent has gone up loads in Edinburgh. We've never refinanced it. We might have overpaid, I don't know, 5-6 grand on the job, and it probably cost us an extra 3-4 months of rent when it wasn't ready to rent. So overall, if it cost us 10 grand, it's done all right over the last 20 years, and we still own it and it does fine. And as I said, property is very forgiving if you hold on to it. No.
Yeah, it is. This is not a get rich. If you're in for get rich quick, churn and burn, then these types of things will hurt. But we've just got to keep our eye on the prize and the revenue that building is going to generate for us, and we can recoup and re-go and go again. Whereas his reputation, who knows? Let's see. Oh, that was a bit of a profound ending there.
Oh, we went deep, didn't we?
I know, but I think it's important that I'm probably going to do a post on this on my Instagram soon about sharing my vulnerability and how this has affected me stress-wise quite a lot. And in amongst that, obviously, losing my dog was crushing. So yeah, it's been a tough time, but you just have to pick yourself up and keep going. And actually, at the end of the day, a freaking dodgy builder is not going to kill me over. Losing my dog is way more important than him.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got through the worst of it. It's been major lessons, and as we say, in a month's time, it's not going to matter anymore.
Watch this space. Let's see.
Great. All right. Well, so lessons from 20 odd years in the property game when it comes to working with builders and contractors. As I said, this is not a massive beat up session on contracts and builders. There are some brilliant contracts and builders out there. Just go find them. When you find really good ones, look after them, incentivize them. I think this is something we've done in the past, is to incentivize people to do a good job and to finish on time, and then less likely to take on other jobs before they finish yours. So there's lots of things, we always prefer to incentivize rather than punish for being late. So there's lots of positives about building a really great relationship with them. But I'd always say keep it at arm's length, because you might have to sack them.
Don't get too pally. Well, we know you're not going to do that. That's for sure.
Nah.
Right. Until next time.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Caroline. Hopefully we'll see. I think this episode will probably air after our networking event. So we'll report back on how our networking event went.
Looking forward to that.
And the next one will be a bit later in the year. We'll keep you informed. If you want to come and meet us, do come and see us at our networking. You can find out all about it at thispropertylife.co.uk, and we will see you very soon.